And when prices increase, when the game shifts, it's not the people who complain that end up making money. If you're grading cards for profit, the rules just changed. PSA keeps raising prices, the turnaround times are still long, and the reality is the old grading playbook is dead. It doesn't work anymore. And one of the biggest mistakes I'm seeing card graders making right now is that you're losing in the draft. The moment you pick the cards that you're submitting, you're already putting yourself behind before the grading process even begins. In this video, I'm going to walk through what actually changed, why grading now is a different game entirely than it used to be, and what strategically do we need to shift if we want to continue to grade profitably, even as PSA continues to raise prices and continues to extend turnaround times. Now, if you're new here, I'm Ryan Seaver. I'm a longtime card investor. I've graded thousands of cards, and I make these videos to help you approach the market more strategically so that you can skip the expensive mistakes and get more for your money in the card market. All right, let's dive into this. So grading is a powerful strategy in the card market because it's one of the few things that we can do proactively to raise the values of our cards. This is different from any other strategy in the market where we're normally waiting for a player to go out and do some kind of magic on the field or hype cycles to come back in season. But this is a strategy that we can do around the calendar, and we get to control when and what we submit. Now, here's what's happening. So grading used to be cheap. It used to be, $6, $8, $10 per card if you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago. But now we continue to see these steady price increases. So they have so much demand for their product that they are increasing the prices, they're lengthening the turnaround times because they don't have the capacity to keep up with the demand. Now, here's what you need to understand. Every single time the price increases, it changes the math behind the grading game. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect the same result. Now, the old way of grading back when it was super cheap was you could just look at the condition of the card and you had a pretty good feeling that if that card was clean enough to get a 10, you could justify sending it off because the grading fee wasn't that big of a deal. There wasn't that much risk to get cards graded, but as those grading fees have continued to climb over the years, that has forced savvy graders to flip the script. And instead of looking first at condition and saying, okay, this card's clean enough to get a 10, send it. Instead, we have to start with value and make sure that the value is there first to justify the grading fee and the time that we're going to have to wait to get that card back while our money is tied up in that card. And so the higher the price rises, the more selective we have to be. And so looking at the old way of doing this, it just doesn't work anymore. You can't just look at a card and say, oh, this looks clean, let me send it off. You have to look up the numbers. You have to know the math, or you are going to set money on fire. Please don't do this. All right, so if the old playbook doesn't work anymore, what replaces it? If you want grading to be a profitable part of your strategy, even after these price increases, this is how you have to start thinking. So first, and the biggest thing is we've got to stop losing in the draft by submitting cards that just don't have any kind of real upside or profit potential. And this is where a lot of the grading mistakes are made. It doesn't have anything to do with condition. It has to do with just picking cards that don't have upside. You have to look at what is the PSA 10 likely going to be worth when my order comes back. And if there's not meaningful margin built in there, I don't want to send that card. It doesn't make sense to take a risk to get the best possible outcome and then to not make much money on that. Because what if things don't go your way? What if you get a 9? What if you get a random PSA 4? It happens, right? So all of those low dollar cards that are low dollar PSA 10s, if they get the grade you're looking for, just stop grading those. It's not worth it anymore. You wait 5 months, you pay $25, and then you make like $3 if you get a PSA 10 on some of these cards. Like, that is not a good play. That's not a good strategy. Card selection matters now more than ever before. The next thing you have to do to stay profitable is to stop asking the question, does this look like a 10? And instead, we've got to ask the question, is the upside of grading this card worth the risk? So when I'm talking about risk, I'm talking about that grading fee that keeps on climbing. I'm talking about how long it takes to get your card back when you've got your money tied up in that card. Things can change in this market while your cards are out for grading. Seasonal timing shifts happen, hype swings happen, performance impacts card values. And so if your cards are sitting at PSA, like, you can't do anything with them, right? They're locked up there. Your money is tied up until it comes back. And so you've got to make sure that the upside of getting that card graded is actually worth the risk. Because here's the thing, we're hoping to unlock that upside by getting the grade we're looking for. The risk, the turnaround time, the grading fee are all guaranteed. So looking at condition alone is amateur hour. We just don't do that anymore. It doesn't work. We've got to look at the math. We've got to look at the upside. Like, that's how investors think. That's how you make grading a profitable play over and over again. And so right in line with that, the number one thing you can do to increase your grading success is to target higher upside cards. It is everything in the grading game. This is how you win. This is how you go faster than other people that are doing the same thing but are targeting lower upside cards. You can make up so much ground way faster. I'm going to walk you through an example here so you understand what I'm talking about. So let's look at two cards here and I'll show you the difference. So the first one we'll look at is this 2024 Bowman's Best Paul Skeens Showpieces rookie card. They sell for about $50 ungraded, plus the new $25 PSA grading fee, and your $75 into this card. If it gets a 10, you're looking at about $145 as a PSA 10. So even after your selling fees, you're still making over $50 on this card for every time you get a 10. That's not terrible, right? But here's the thing, there are also much higher upside cards out there that you could be targeting with the same type of money. So if we take a look at a 2024 Bowman Chrome Draft Connor Griffin Refractor, just the base refractor. So he's the #1 prospect in all of baseball right now. If you look at these cards ungraded, they're selling between $55 and $65. So maybe a touch higher than the Skeens, but really the same ballpark. Add that $25 grading fee and you're into this card for about $85. But if this card gets a PSA 10, you're looking at closer to $300. So in the first example, we're spending $75 to profit about $50 per PSA 10 in the Skeens example. But in the Connor Griffin example, we're spending about $85. So a hair more, of course. But then we're making about $175 of net profit even after our selling fees and our grading fees are taken into consideration. That's a massive jump. That's more than 3 times the profit on the Skeens card, and that is how you go fast in the grading game. You target higher upside cards. Now, another key piece here is to target cards that are cleaner, cards that have historically graded well. And the way that we tell which cards these are is to look at the gem rate. So the gem rate is the total number of PSA 10s divided by the total number of cards graded. So basically, it's like the success rate for that particular card. Now, the gem rate is only a clue. It's not going to tell you specifically how each card is going to grade, but since we can't see condition perfectly online, what it can do is help us sort of focus in on the cards that have historically graded well, which tells us that maybe those sets were a little bit more cleanly manufactured than some of the other cards from the same set or from other sets. So for example, if I find a card that has a 90% gem rate, it doesn't mean that every single card from that set is going to get a PSA 10, but it means that they've historically graded very, very strongly. And so that tells me that, okay, maybe this is going to be an easier card to find in clean gradable condition compared to a card from the same set that has a 20% gem rate, where only 2 out of 10 cards are getting a PSA 10, at least so far. Now, gem rate only matters until you can see the card in person, because ultimately the grader is not looking at the gem rate and assigning a grade based on that. They're looking at your card's condition, and that is what the grade is based on. So if a card has a 100% gem rate, but your copy is creased in half, it doesn't matter what the gem rate is. You're not going to get a 10 on that. So how do we do this? How do we put all the pieces together here? So you can find this data in the PSA Pop report, but I actually prefer to use the site gemrate.com. It's a fantastic website. They've got all kinds of grading data. Gemrate.com, give them a try. But what this shows us is we can see the different gem rates in the grading data so far for each of the products. So let's look at 2025 Topps Chrome, for example. So we can see there's actually a pretty lousy gem rate here of 31% so far of the cards that have been graded, at least at the time of this recording. And so when we look down here, what I'm looking for is, are there any copies of any of these cards that are doing better than that? And right away, we can see that this Cooper Flag X-Fractor is actually grading at 49% gem rate so far. And so what that tells us is that, okay, even though the product isn't grading all that well, there are some cards within the product that we can focus on where we may have a stronger shot at finding clean gradable cards based on historically how they've graded. And so what I'd be doing from there is taking a look at that flag card and looking up raw prices and PSA 10 prices to see what the margin is on a potential PSA 10 grade. So if I like the gem rate and I like the PSA 10 margin, then that's a go. That's a green light to go to eBay and start trying to find clean copies of those cards. Now, I did this for years and it absolutely works, and it helps you find those cards that are going to increase your grading success, but it is a very tedious, manual, time-consuming process, and I personally got tired of that, so I actually built a software to fix it. Now, this is called Coin, the Card Opportunity and Investing Navigator. We call it Coin for short. So it shows you all the key data points on one table here. So you don't have to cross-reference between multiple sites and have 4 different windows open. And it ranks the card based on the overall grading upside. Another piece to Coin is we have a higher end list as well. So if you're looking for cards that have this bigger PSA 10 margin, for example, to offset some of these rising grading fees, these are the types of cards that will easily absorb that. So effectively what Coin allows you to do is 5 hours of grading research in 5 seconds, but ultimately what we're doing is compressing that research step so you don't have to spend hours and hours trying to figure out what cards do I even go after. You can just take a look at what are those cards that have big grading margin and a strong gem rate and just get to the part of looking for the clean copies on eBay. If you want to try Coin, you can do so for free with a free trial. I'll leave a link in the description, but otherwise, let's get back to the video. Now, the reason why knowing the math is so important is because margin protects you. It makes it easier when you get PSA 9s. It makes it easier when you buy cards that come in the mail that just aren't even worth submitting to PSA in the first place. And it certainly helps when we're dealing with these rising fees. So anytime you get a PSA 10 that has massive margin built into it, that's going to more than cover the 9s. It's going to more than cover the grading fee and still leave you a meaningful profit. If you're targeting these cards where you're making $12, even if you get a PSA 10, like guys, you're not going to make money on this at all. You're just not going to. So targeting higher upside cards is how you go faster. It is one of the biggest unlocks in the entire grading space and in the entire card market. Very few things will make a bigger impact on your card business than picking better cards with higher upside built into them. The last part of the equation is the turnaround time. So some of the turnaround times have been lengthened as well. It's not ideal because the longer our money is tied up, the longer it is before we can take that money out of that card and get it into the next card to continue to move our operation forward. So I like to look at how long is my money going to be tied up and how many times throughout the year can I recycle those same dollars. The concept is called money velocity, but it's basically using the same dollar over and over and over again instead of having to pull in extra money from your day job to keep your operation moving forward. What we want to do is get that money turned around quickly so that we can recycle those dollars. And so the turnaround times are critically important here in understanding what you're signing up for when you're sending off that long bulk 95 business day turnaround time. Like that is 5 calendar months, guys. That's a long time to have your cards sitting there for grading. And that means that you're not making money on those cards during that entire 5 months. And again, things can shift during that time. So if we're looking at how do we optimize this, one of the best parts about targeting some of those higher upside cards is that when we have that much margin built in, sometimes that means that we can logically justify paying more money to get a faster turnaround time from PSA. So if I go to that Skeens example and I've only got $50 of profit margin if I get a 10, well, it's really hard for me to justify spending $50 on the grading fee instead of $25, right? But in that Connor Griffin example, if I've got $175 of margin for every single 10 that I get, man, it's not that tough to justify spending an extra $25 to get that card back multiple calendar months faster so that I can lock in the profit and then rinse and repeat by buying another card and sending it off to be graded too. All right, so the reality here is grading didn't suddenly get worse. It's not impossible to profit. We just have to be more strategic about how we're grading. And when prices increase, when fees change, when the game shifts, we've got to make adjustments to our strategy. It's not the people who complain that end up making money. It's the people that think about, okay, I can't change the policy, but I can change how I react and the types of cards that I'm submitting. Those are the people that end up profiting. So I encourage you to start looking at grading like a math problem and know the numbers and focus on those high upside cards and make sure that the grading is actually worth the risk that you're taking. As long as you stay selective with what you submit, you can still do extremely well in this market. Now, if this resonates with you and you want to continue to get more strategic in the card market, take a look at Ignite. It's my membership program with over 150 fellow card investors who are learning, leveling up, and winning together, where we actually help you apply this stuff in your own business. I'll leave a link in the description if that sounds at all interesting, but otherwise, we'll see you on the next video.